Добрый день, уважаемые дамы и господа.
Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen.
It's my great pleasure and honor to welcome you at Gaidar Forum, one of the biggest Russian social, economic, educational and scientific conferences that my University of RANEPA, organizes every year, plus minus during the same dates. We have fantastically interesting topic today connected with the new normality or new normal, and I guess that we shall learn and enrich through sharing a lot over the day. In fact, I just wanted to welcome you as a host because we have a moderator, and our moderator is Mr. Andrew Wilson, the Executive Director of AMBA International, great friend of RABE, Russian Association of Business Education. And I'm sorry, Andrew, I want to tell that you are very experienced about Russia. I consider you've been to Russia at least a couple dozen times and traveled and visited a dozen of cities across the country for sure. So we have fantastically experienced moderator who can see the world from both sides very well. And finally, in Russia we have 2 New Years. First New Year we celebrate together with the world and together with Europe, and this is on the 1st of January. And second New Year, we call it Old New Year. We celebrate during the night from the 13th to 14th. It is connected with Orthodox Church calendar. So I want to use this opportunity and to congratulate all of you with the Old New Russian Year and to wish you a lot of health, prosperity, proliferation, and all the best. And now it's my pleasure and honor to give floor to Andrew Main Wilson.
Thank you very much, Sergey, and welcome everyone. Sergey, I don't know whether you're still with us, but I did want to ask, this proves this is live, if you are also going to be giving a presentation, because you were on the original program.
You see, in fact, I am with you. I do not have slides, but I expect if you grant me a floor to talk for 5, 7 minutes, whatever you permit me, because I have observations. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for clearing that piece of confusion. So welcome everyone, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the session with some really senior deans and vice rectors from around the world. We'll be covering issues as to what are the key trends, how will COVID impact program content, teaching formats, role of the educator, and what is the optimum balance between technology and face-to-face contact. Just to set the scene, and before I introduce our speakers, I'm just going to give you the top line result of a very relevant survey that AMBA and BGA did in September of last year, which was an education technology survey of 171 business school leaders in the AMBA and BGA networks. And it showed, and it's just very brief, 75% of AMBA and BGA schools are now using virtual classrooms. 25% are now using virtual reality to teach programs. And when asked if they want to retain the technology that's been introduced during COVID, 16% of those business school leaders said they wanted to retain aspects of the new technology implemented during the pandemic. Not a single dean or director wanted to go back to the old way and discard all that new technology. And 84% wanted to retain all of that technology. So we are talking about a new future here, and I'm delighted that we've got such senior deans to do it. So it's my great pleasure to introduce you to our 6 speakers this afternoon. Each will speak for approximately 7 to 8 minutes. And at the end, if the very end, if there's time, I will ask them a few questions. So just to introduce all our speakers to begin with, first up will be Caryn Beck-Dudley, the president of AACSB. AACSB, which together with AMBA and BGA and EFMD comprise the 3 international global accreditation organizations. And of course, our three brands comprise the prestigious Triple Crown accreditation. Then we're followed by four highly experienced deans of four of the very best AMBA and AACSB schools in the world. They'll be delighted to welcome in François Ortalo-Magné, the Dean of London Business School, Sergey himself, who needs no introduction now, Stephen de Haes, Dean of Antwerp Management School, Nicola Kleyn, Dean of Exec Ed at Rotterdam School of Management, and of course Nicola formerly was the Dean of Gibbs in South Africa, which along with University of Cape Town and Stellenbosch is one of the three top schools in the whole of Africa. And then finally, for the first time, at least I believe it's your first time, I will welcome Stephen Bach, the Executive Dean at King's Business School at King's College London. So those are our six eminent speakers. Caryn, over to you, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm excited to be back with all of you at the Guider Forum. I wish we could be in person. Hopefully next year. I have not been to Moscow and I'm looking forward to doing that. So thanks, Sergey, for the opportunity to share thoughts and perspectives on the new normal of business education and how we can work together to redefine the future of business education. Deepak Chopra has an applicable quote for today's environment. Quote, "All great changes are preceded by chaos," close quote. Is that not true? We have all been through a lot these last 2 years, personally and professionally. At the onset of the pandemic, things were chaotic. It suddenly challenged all of us to adapt and overcome in ways we never dreamed we would have to. Remote learning, the role of the instructor in and out of the classroom, the relative importance of standardized tests and grading systems, and the entire construct of higher education has become an ecosystem ripe for change. We now find ourselves in the midst of redefining what our new normal is going to be in the business school, at the university, in the workforce, and within our society. I'd like to say that we can plan for the long term, but if there's one thing the pandemic has shown me, it's that agility is the key to success. And we must assume that the strategies we put in place now may very well change in 6 months or even 2 months or even tomorrow. As leaders, we are challenged to accept the fact that things will continue and are always changing, and we must be comfortable with being uncomfortable. No matter what school you were from or where you were located, we have all been presented with a precious opportunity to come together and create the change we know is needed in business education in order to continue to support learners and the global economy. We are at a unique moment in our history where we must not only think about how to design a new normal, but to act as compassionate leaders who drive business education towards the needs of society so that we can make lasting, meaningful change. Each school has its own definition of normal, and there are varying degrees in which the pandemic impacted education, from recruitment and retention to curriculum development and research to the role of the faculty and the agility expected of educational leaders. And although each of us is redefining what normal means in the context of our schools and businesses, there are components of business education we all share and have an opportunity to redefine to ensure the continued success of our schools, our learners, and our global economy. The role of educators has changed dramatically and will continue to evolve. For example, I am asking myself, will there ever be such thing as a typical instructor again? Or should there be? Business education continues to evolve on many fronts: delivery methods, curriculum, research, experiential learning, assurance of learning, and various others. Today's schools have evolved in response to the pandemic, which was a sudden and dramatic event. But how should schools approach continued evolution? Should we ever use the word, once again, normal in the context of business education? The workplace has dramatically changed as well, not only in the where and how people work, but the skill sets required. The ease with which employees are pivoting their jobs or even starting new careers altogether, and every single one of us must be considered a lifelong learner, constantly acquiring new skills to succeed as we navigate the changing workplace. Is education keeping up with this type of reality? So let's talk quickly about some of these concepts. Our new normal, I believe, starts with our educators, the role that they play, and the idea that there are different types of responsibilities educators need to help support learners as they prepare for or adjust to the workforce. Traditionally, the role of an educator was to deliver content to learners and to ensure they were acquiring the foundational knowledge needed on a particular topic. The instructor professor was viewed as the only or primary respected source of that information. However, our new normal has already been defined for us. The internet opened the world to learners everywhere, providing access to free, relevant, and valuable educational content delivered by credible and respected sources, which naturally begs the question, if the content can be free and accessed without an instructor, what value or role does or should the instructor play? The new normal for a professor has shifted and will continue to shift towards that of a mentor, a facilitator, a connector, and a guide who supports learners in connecting the foundational context to real-world application. A student who simply reads how to write a business plan online without the benefit of a professor and their classmates collaborating and exploring how that business plan might succeed or fail misses out on the most valuable elements of education. These are human insight and context. The new educators must also be lifelong learners themselves, constantly acquiring new skills to guide and support learners. With this change in role, there are also changes in responsibility. I suggest educators are now responsible to help instill values, to help guide attitudes and behaviors, and to help learners expand their skill set to serve as the leaders of the future. This means the curriculum must be adjusted to account for these new skill sets. Attributes like agility, risk-taking, continual learning, compassion, empathy, and creating positive societal impact through business action are top of mind, but I'm sure there are many, many more. From there, our educators will drive the new normal in business education. There was a time not too long ago when the idea of teaching exclusively online was not considered by many business schools, but the pandemic changed that, as Andrew reported. The normal in-classroom education rapidly shifted to online for emergency teaching model to provide continuity. But then the new normal changed once again to schools offering hybrid and other learning options. With this new normal of online learning, students now have a wide array of options. They can study wherever and whenever they want. Their new normal is evolving to expect online options for all types of learning, which may present challenges for schools to meet their needs or to transition back to fully in-classroom programs. Just as it's become more normal to leverage online platforms for education delivery, it must also become more normal for us to challenge these platforms and ensure they continue to meet our needs, like ensuring they are measuring student learning for both subject matter topics and skill sets, and ensure the curriculum is developed for the students' future success as business leaders. Online learning platforms are no longer an emergency option. They are a normal part of education delivery and are here to stay. Historically, a typical learner experience also included some form of experiential learning in class. But what now? Should it be normal that the experiential experience is online? Since many companies have adopted, including AACSB, a remote working policy, and learners need to be able to successfully function in that environment? Or should experiential learning still occur only on site? Do we know enough about learner expectations and employer needs to evolve business education in order to meet the needs of both? And finally, business education needs to support the new normal of the global workplace. Just as business education underwent and is still experiencing great change, the global workplace is going through the same thing. There has been a dramatic shift in the normal way we all work, and new required skills have emerged. For example, new skill sets include an expanded role of leadership, adept at building and managing a collaborative team online, which, as we all know, presents unique challenges compared to building teams in person. Do we know how to do that really? Are we ensuring that our graduates have acquired some of the softer skill sets that really shine in the online environment? And if not, how are those softer skill sets like listening, empathy, critical thinking, etc., honed in an online or hybrid environment? The workforce in many parts of the world is going through a great transition as well. Layoffs, increased number of resignations, new hires, and individuals pivoting into new and more personally rewarding careers, creating a greater demand for education, whether it's upskilling, reskilling, or earning a new and different type of degree. The return on investment of business education has been in question in some aspects of society, and that's one normality we can rely on. But now the questions are different and will be more complex for us to solve. So with that, I'm going to cede my time to the rest of the deans who are actually in the throes of the workforce and helping navigate through this environment. So thank you once again for having me.
Thank you very much, Caryn. Thank you very much indeed. François, over to you.
Thank you, Andrew, and it's delightful to be here with you all in the GELA forum and online, and delighted to be part of this panel. So I also get a chance to hear from colleagues who are helping redefine business schools for the future. The main theme of what I want to share actually is, it was captured correctly in the title, is business schools with an S. And the future I see is one of greater differentiation, with, as Caryn said, maybe no typical professor, no typical schools. So let me explain why do I see a more differentiated future, which actually be a richer future for individuals and organizations. Just three trends to point to. First is the world context is such, pandemic, climate, digital transitions, AI. We are in a world context that requires many organizations to transform. And it's not clear. It's clear for everyone that transformation requires investing in people. That's the first trend. The second is, in spite of the pandemic, we are living longer. And many of us today and in the future will be looking towards a 100-year life, which is a life with multiple careers. And so education is going to remain relevant and important for the 100-year life. And the third thing I would point to from the world context is that the pandemic, I'm not sure that was so different when it comes to what it has had an impact on education, but it's certainly been a catalyst. It has accelerated lots of innovations which have prompted us to jump forward in how is it that we leverage both digital technologies, but also all the progress we have made with regard to understanding how people learn. Because of this, we've become much better at reaching people and walking the journey with them. And so, yes, Caryn talked about how each of us are redefining how we contribute to business education. And it's in this richness that I see a future that is a lot more differentiated, and a future that offers much richer offerings for people who want to walk the journey, organization who wants to transform. So let me say a little bit more about what are the dimensions of differentiation that I see as being particularly important. First, with regard to the what. Difference between some of us offering one-off experiences that are targeted at the acquisition of knowledge or skills versus walking the journey together, supporting individual career progressions, supporting organization transformations. That's about curating a coherent offering to support someone or an organization's journey. That's the first differentiation in the what, one-offs versus journeys. Second element of differentiation in the who, mass open offerings, where maybe the learning engagement is participants side by side, versus the extreme selected peers, selected within experiences where their talent and their diversity is enriching the experience for everyone involved. So mass open versus selected peers. So that was for the what and for the who. In terms of the how, I see some danger of some of the business education picking up on fads and trends. Certainly it is the case with some of the disruptors into our market, versus education that is anchored in academic research. Much more expensive to provide actually, but I would argue much more valuable and longer lasting in terms of impact. And then finally, I want to talk about the why. Because we are not all created different, those of us providing business education out there, and mindful of the fact that our market is populated, disrupted by more than just business schools. And some of us are in there to maximize profits. And it's worth asking, where are the margins going? And some of us, it's often the case for business schools, we are in there in support of a community, alumni, partners, where all the surplus that we make, they are there to engage that community and support the research that is foundational to the experiences that we offer. So that's a kind of differentiation that I see in terms of the what, the who, the how, and the why. And so at LBS, we've taken a stand. And yes, we appreciate our long-standing history of outstanding one-off experiences that we've delivered to students, to organizations. But what we pride ourselves in is how we walk the journey, and we want to do more of that and leverage what we learned during the pandemic to be there, walking the journey with individuals and with organizations. The experience that we give, they are enriched by the quality, the attributes, the diversity of the participants we select into these experiences. And the content we deliver is always anchored in academic research. And I understand that this is a more expensive proposition. We have to face that fact. But at the same time, it is a proposition that is dedicated to the betterment of the individual and the organization, because we are a self-standing, not-profit organization, which prides itself in giving lifelong membership to its alumni and engaging in long-term partnerships with corporates. And so we're particularly pleased with our relationships in Russia and to see so many Russian individuals join our programs, both in London and in Dubai. And the same is true with corporate programs, for example. Very proud of our long-standing partnership with formerly Sberbank, helping the transition to Sber. So that's my view, Andrew, as to where we are. Is I see a future that's much more differentiated. I've tried to articulate some of the dimensions. I'm sure there are some others. And the big benefit is to individuals and to organizations, and hopefully to the world, that we as an industry will be able to cater to the different needs of people in a much more impactful way. And with that, back over to you.
Thank you very much, François. Thank you very much indeed. Sergey, over to you for some brief perspectives from Moscow.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for this opportunity. In fact, I have 4 small observations. I'd rather say they are not real pieces of research or theory. They're something like small findings, though I consider that maybe it would help us to enrich through sharing too. Observation number 1. We really move from the world of VUCA to the world of BANI, new acronym, where volatility at the beginning is changed to brittle world, fragile world. And in fact, this is first observation which we could feel both at IBS Moscow and at the Russian Association of Business Education. Because if I shall try to revise our recent history, Russian business education, that is about 3 dozen years old. Russian business education is plus minus accustomed to volatility, to crises and going up again, and we do not react to them with a lot of panic, or we do not spend a lot of our nerves, do not provide a lot of anxiety about that. But when pandemic came, and all of a sudden we faced a lot of isolation, when we had to close the universities over 2 or 3 days, when the same came to executive retraining and MBA, executive MBA sector of our activities, we found out that the world really became brittle and fragile, that all of a sudden, within several weeks, the whole environment can be changed. And so we have to learn how to adapt to those new changes, and we have to learn how to relax when we cannot sleep at night and cannot explain what is happening and what would be in a couple of days or in a couple of weeks. Next thing, when it happened, through the panic, we started making different type of scenarios. Against with volatility, we know from the experience in Russia, I cannot really explain why, but our markets of MBA and executive MBA programs and our market of BBA and Master of Science programs, they have different rhythm of volatility. When MBA is going up, BBA is going down by enrollment. And over 30 years, we became accustomed to that. That provides counterbalance. When pandemic came, we didn't know what to think about. And so we were calculating two different scenarios. One was crash scenario, if the enrollment would be about 20% of our normal, and another one when it would be 100 plus. In a couple of months, we came to understanding that the market is not ready really to change the demand radically. And finally, for the whole of Russian business education, after the first year of pandemic, we had 90 plus enrollment across business schools of the country. But it took us certain time to understand that though the changes were really radical, the market and the customers, they follow business schools, their brands, their experience, and the pieces of advice of their friends. Second thing, my personal observation, and same I heard from my colleagues in Russia, that today the leaders of business school, they have to be ready anytime to run in for the risk much higher than a couple of years ago. An example was already mentioned by François Ortalo-Magné just before that, when he mentioned that we cooperate about modular on leadership retraining of our executive MBA program. For several years, we are sending groups of our executive MBA students to London Business School. And then all of a sudden, London Business School was closed. And it was self-isolation. And so everything was halted. And as far as Russian executive students are concerned, they told us, we refuse flatly to get a substitute of online education. Here in Russia, one of the very important positions in cooperation of top businessmen is development of mutual trust. It's a separate cross-cultural topic of which I'm ready to talk for hours. So they need to look into the eyes of each other. And as a result, me and my colleagues, we came to François and told him, François, I don't know how you do that quickly and how much efforts you have to make, but we need to place the program from London to your branch or affiliate at Dubai, because to Dubai we can fly with our Sputnik V. It is accepted there. Dubai is not closed, and our people want to work inside the classroom. It's, to make a long story short, for 2 or 3 weeks, both sides were very nervous because the devil is in details. And when we started looking for the professors, who lives where, who is vaccinated, who is not, how we shall provide the trip of about 200 students within several months, one group after another to Dubai, with the amount of money, I'm sorry, average about $500,000. It was a very high stake. Thank you very much to the team of London Business School and to François, who supported that. And as a result, we reestablished this over-the-sea modular. And thank you very much. Because of that, we increased our enrollment in the year of 1991 much more than was our loss in 2020 in 2020. Next short observation.
Sergey, you've got 1 more minute.
One more minute. I'll be out of... So I consider that now we have to investigate the behavior of the people in different managerial culture more carefully. And so our school is planning to initiate special research on cross-culture of Eurasian model. And so people, I'll come to you and ask to introduce me to your researcher, because I'm looking for international expertise. And final one, within 20 seconds. I consider that one very important point we should have into consideration. We're coming to the effect of Tour de Babel, or Babylon Tower, when the world that was speaking more or less the same language. I'm not speaking about English language. I'm speaking about technical language of different type of scientists and of generations. Now we're coming to effect of this Babylon Tower, because we learn that the community of IT managers, the community of digital managers, the community of neuroscientific managers, they speak with a lot of different terms, which create a lot of misunderstanding, because the culture itself is the system of shared meanings, to say nothing about that generation that has its language and its slang in internet. And so today we face growing difficulties in competing at the segments of the market for those group of people, because newborn companies, especially oriented for those stratas, they speak very special language. And I consider it's the challenge for all of us, and we have to learn it. Thank you very much. Sorry that I was talking that long.
Spasiba. Thank you very much, Sergey. Okay, moving like lightning now over to Belgium, and welcome to Stephen in Antwerp.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to Sergey. It's a privilege to be here with you at the Gaidar Forum. It's unfortunate that we are not together, of course. I had the privilege and the opportunity to visit our friends, colleagues, and partners at Moscow in IBS and RANEPA 2 months ago, after many, many months of lockdown between Europe and Russia. So I was there 2 months ago. It was great to be there again. And of course, I wish our friends in Russia all the best with the pandemic also for the coming period. So Andrew, to answer your question, I would like to focus on 2 elements, maybe a bit on the what and the how, just as François did. So the what question more focused on the purpose of the school, or as business schools, and then on the how question, which is more geared towards how we can realize that purpose as business schools. So on the what question, which is an existential question, of course, it's about what is the purpose or the role of business schools in society. I think all of us, all business schools also here around the table, have been focusing a lot, of course, on the theme of sustainability and systemic thinking and the stakeholder perspective towards society. But I think we should, certainly after this pandemic, consider to move beyond that, to move beyond just being sustainable as society, and to be more ambitious, to go beyond what we would call break-even goals, and to go together collectively, to demonstrate collectively positive leadership towards a net profit as a society, which we could then call maybe thriving towards a better and a positive society. So I think as business schools and together with industry, we have a collective leadership to take on board, to go and move beyond break-even goals in terms of sustainability and to thrive towards a net profit for society. And I think that has an impact on what we should be doing at schools towards defining what is impactful leadership, what is an impactful leader towards society in terms of having a global mindset, in terms of having a critical mindset and a sustainable mindset towards aiming for that thriving for the future. But it also is about what François referred to, how do we look at transforming organizations? That's about, of course, as François just mentioned, about putting your human assets at the center of your organization, enabling organizations to always think outside in towards innovation and new strategies, but maybe foremost to also, as industries, think from an ecosystem and platform perspective towards creating new and unique value for society, so that individual, micro, meta, and mesa, micro level towards sustainable transformation becomes even more important for the future. So that's in terms of what should we be teaching as business schools, or what should we be focusing at in terms of our purpose. I think it goes beyond just sustainability, and it's about a thriving future at the level of the leaders that we would like to develop, but also in the way we want to partner with organizations toward transformation. And then on the how, I would like to, I think, touch upon what Andrew and Sergey and François and Caryn already mentioned, but I would like to take out 3 elements again about transformative learning, lifelong learning, and ecosystems again. I fully concur with the previous speakers that, of course, there is already a lot of top-notch knowledge in the market available in all types of formats, in videos, in MOOCs, in books, in libraries, and so on and so forth. And that's probably not the role that we as business schools have to take. Our role is to make sure that that knowledge is turned into a transformative and impactful learning experience. And as Caryn referred to, I think that requires the faculty of the school to turn from being God to be the guide and the coach towards that impactful learning experience. And I think we have an important role to play as business schools in that transformation. And as Andrew referred to as well, the role of technology here is a unique opportunity. It's not a threat, it's a unique opportunity to play out more that role of the faculty member in creating that impactful learning experience, either on campus or in the virtual world. So that's on the impactful or transformative learning experience. The second element, where also all previous speakers refer to, is about lifelong learning. I think we are all, of course, in that world, and the lifelong learning expectations are changing a lot. We are getting older, as François referred to, but also in many regions in the world, also if I look at Europe and Belgium, the unique asset that we have are typically the brains of our people. In Belgium, we don't have natural resources as gas or solar power or wind power. So the unique competitive asset is the brains of our people. So the importance of lifelong learning in our region becomes more important. But at the same time, I feel in our region that the demand of industry is changing as well towards lifelong learning. Not a one-off, where François also referred to it, not a one-off, but a journey. But that requires that we as business schools have to offer solutions that are more modular, more flexible, more personalized. The world of micro-credentials also is in that domain, so that we can create that journey that François referred to as business schools. And then the third and final element is about the ecosystems again, but then at the level of business schools. I think as business schools, we have to be modest and understand that we are not the only ones in the world of executive education. Of course, already for many years, you have the corporate universities who provide top quality. You have the commercial players who also have top-notch knowledge, often in their offerings. And I think what we should offer to the market is end-to-end solutions towards what they require, which is how can we bridge the gap between the skills that we currently have and competencies towards the skills that we will require in 10 and 20 years from now. And I think as business schools, we should be open to try to find smart platforms and ecosystems with all the players in the market to create more that end-to-end service offering towards our industry and our society. That being said, on the what and the how, thank you for listening to me, and I would like to pass on back to Andrew.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and perfect timing as well. Much appreciated. Okay, so staying in the region in Europe, moving next door into the Netherlands, we welcome Nicola. Nicola, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrew. It's lovely to meet some new faces. Good to see Sergey again. We've spent many years talking about what it means to run business schools in very volatile environments. I thought I was moving to a nice, safe, gentle environment in the Netherlands, and then of course COVID hit, but such is life. Andrew, I've been so struck by the comments that have been made from a research perspective. I think we start approaching saturation in some ways, so I don't want to repeat, because there have been a number of things that have been said that I think I'd be the fifth person to start saying them. So I'm going to just throw out, I might make it slightly shorter because I can see we're also constrained for time, but let me throw out a few comments. I think the first thing is, when we talk about what is the new normal, we need to be very clear about what is driving change. And I think there's a temptation here that the pandemic fogs us, and that when the pandemic lifts, suddenly we haven't been aware of some of the deeper changes or focusing on the deeper changes that are taking place. I'm not suggesting for a moment that my colleagues haven't referenced these, but to me, in the course of history, the pandemic is actually, yes, it's a pivot point, but the more fundamental changes are what are happening from the perspective of climate change, what is happening globally in terms of changing geopolitics, what is happening in terms of fragmentation and potentially threats to projects of globalization and internationalization and themes that we as schools have held very dear. So I think being clear that there is no return to a normal, but actually the pandemic has been a period of, I think, gross disarray, but we must be careful it doesn't mask fundamental, deep-seated changes. What do I think, and this is a personal belief, I can't prove it, but what do I think should remain normal? I think our reliance on the scientific method. I think the importance of the academy. I think in a world of fake media, and François has already alluded to this, but the importance of evidence-based, of the role that we can play in supporting business and the broader environment with high quality observations that come from a bedrock of research and a support of the scientific method. And I say this because of an enormous concern that in one way we've seen the democratization of access. Anybody can wake up and deliver a profound moment of learning using any one of a number of platforms. And even today, I was in a presentation where a colleague of mine said, well, we offer this course and it must be going down really well because it has 4.5 stars out of 5 as a MOOC. And we should not confuse likability with rigor. We'd like to do both, but I think we need to be very careful not to lose rigor. In terms of our purpose and who we serve, I think we acknowledge we're seeing a fundamental shift from being agentic in driving business performance to saying that we want to drive business performance, but in the context of making sure, I often use the phrase that we're good ancestors, that people will look back at us not in 5 years' time or in 10 years' time, but in 2 or 3 generations and go, those guys really started shifting. And for me, that was a major reason to join RSM, was this mission to be a force for positive change. It's much easier to say than it is to do. And it calls for us to pay constant attention to it. But this question of who we serve, it has to be greater than business. It has to be to support business, to serve a greater end. At the same time, I think we are seeing a mass democratization, particularly of post-experience education. And I think that's incredibly exciting. Some years ago, there was a gentleman called Martin Parker who wrote a book where he said we should bulldoze, I think, 13,000, most then, of the business schools. And I would go, absolutely not. We have a critical role to play in terms of really serving an existing cohort of managers and employees and entrepreneurs and knowledge workers who may have been trained to succeed in a world that is not going to exist. So we have a critical role to play in unlearning and supporting that. But we've also got to do some really deep introspection of our own institutions. I think in many cases, we, and it depends on your structure, but we have built silos. I think sometimes our clients are closer to us than the faculty next door, and particularly projects where we collaborate with other universities, not only schools of management, but to come together to solve global problems. This is tricky, and I can see the difficulties here at Rotterdam, where we try and work as Erasmus University with Delft University of Technology and Leiden to try and really come together and harness the very good thinking that exists in those silos. So this question of how we work with other schools, but also very importantly with other universities, I think is absolutely critical. I think one of the elephants in the room, and François again, I think started whipping off the covers on this elephant, is this question of the role of the private sector. Now, obviously, the private sector can be private schools, but the massification of education and the emergence of platform businesses is something we have to think about. Stephen made a comment just now where you spoke about ecosystems, and you spoke about coming together to build platforms. I'm absolutely pro making access available. What I'm not certain about is the deployment of funds that I think would have gone to fund research and thought leadership and knowledge creation into shareholder pockets. That's good for markets. I think it is something we have to seriously think about as business schools. So the fundamental structures, if we're going to move to see platform businesses to which business professors might be able to offer a course on those platforms as the de facto model for our business schools, I wonder what that means for us and how we navigate that, because I think it's a major issue. I think just on a note of appreciation, which is very much part of my leadership philosophy, I think we do have some big problems to solve in terms of this new normal, but I do want to pay tribute to how universities have navigated the pandemic. I think one of the things we have to pay attention to is deep fatigue and potential burnout of our faculty, our students, and this question of mental wellness and how we try and re-inject vitality in the system to equip us to deal with greater changes is something that's very much on my mind. So not a nice, neat presentation. I had one, but I thought I'd just throw out some comments and also pay tribute to all of the speakers before me, because I don't think anything's being said that I disagree with. So thank you, Andrew. Back to you.
Well, thank you so much, Nicola. And I can reassure all schools listening that the appreciation from students is huge. We surveyed all of our 65,000 student and graduate members for the quality feedback on their schools during the pandemic, and it was hugely positive, with tremendous feedback, recognising the quality and efforts that all of you schools have made. So perfect timing now. Over to you. I think you're just round the corner from me in London, Stephen, but over to you for the final session of the day.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
You might want to maximise it.
Is that good?
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Andrew, and it's fantastic to be here today. Because I haven't been to this forum before, I won't dwell on this, but just to let you know that King's Business School is a relatively new school within King's College London, and we have about 4,000 students and about nearly 400 faculty and staff members. So I just want to say something about the context and a bit about the what and the how. I mean, I think this was the sort of dilemma that we're still working with. You know, it was this, is everything going to change, or, are we going to return to the pre-COVID model? And I think fairly obviously we're going to be in that question mark area. We talk about blended and hybrid, but I think the key thing is, what does this really mean? So let me just say something about a few things that I've observed at King's, which I think resonates with what other people are saying. And I think this is not just what's happening in university, but what's happening in organizations. I think, we have to be very conscious of what Nicola said about burnout, but I think our staff have really excelled themselves in terms of, we've probably achieved more change in, the last year than we have in the previous 5, 10, in terms of acceleration of digitalization. We also need to be conscious that the pandemic has had a really uneven impact within our staff group and within our student group. Some of our students are suffering from digital poverty. They're not all digital natives. I don't think we can make that assumption. And our staff as well have been affected very unevenly. So we need to expand the digital landscape, and as others have said, there's a demand for innovation and flexibility. I think one of the things that troubles me is I think the sector has not always been very good at explaining the value of digital resources. So if I think about the analogy with supermarkets where, you know, no one would say click and collect is bad, no one would say online shopping is bad, but somehow we seem to have got into a situation where we're not promoting enough the benefits and the richness of the on-campus and digital mix. And I think that's a challenge we need to take forward. I think there is huge value in the on-campus experience, and it touches a bit on what some of the others have said about online providers. That, you know, we are humans, that human connectivity, that empathy, those informal conversations are so important. I think we also need to think about the way in which we use our estate. That's a really important and expensive resource, and we need to think about that much more. So just before I say what we're doing, what is the context that we're in? Because I think that goes beyond the pandemic and really affects what we're doing. The first is, you know, we're very fortunate in that the thirst for knowledge continues. We're seeing globally the growth in student numbers, and at King's, as in many other institutions, we've had bumper years in terms of student numbers. But as others have said, there are questions. We do have to prove the ROI and the value for money of what we're delivering. And I think increasingly that's about the journey that people are on. Thirdly, I think we have seen questions, as we have within organizations. I speak to a lot of organization leaders. There's been a loss in some ways of confidence and resilience, an increase of resilience in some ways, but also an increase in anxiety amongst our students that we have to support. And of course, we all know it's a tough world out there. So we have to fulfill our students' aspirations for career success. Many of them have become a lot more entrepreneurial as well, and we focused a lot more on entrepreneurship. So let me just finish by saying a little bit of the how. What are the things that we are really enhancing and focusing on more at King's? Again, these are not necessarily new, but I think they've accelerated. The first one is we're doing a lot more within the curriculum on analytics, financial analytics, digital analytics, but I think we're also making much more use of analytics to track student progress and engagement of our students. Because the risk of working in the way that we're working on this call is it can become a bit transactional. Our students tell us that they can be quite lonely. So we're using AI and other ways to track and enact and further the opportunities for our students. Secondly, curriculum and lifelong learning. We're moving to more flexible curriculum. Some of the topics that people have mentioned already, like ESG, managing disruptive times, but also we're trying to give opportunities to our students much more to be researchers, because we think, you know, those are the sorts of skills and attributes, research in the round, that they're going to need within the workplace. And at King's, we have this great opportunity for interdisciplinary offerings like medtech and entrepreneurship with the engineering school. And finally, personal growth. You know, we're investing a lot more in mental health and well-being. We're using our students much more as co-creators of the curriculum, and also supporting students as buddies, as mentors, and also leveraging and enhancing our careers provision, particularly for our international students. I think my final point is that this has big implications, as other colleagues have said, for the type of staff we have, the attributes of the staff, and the role that they fulfill. So let me thank you very much. It's been great to join you, and let me leave it there.
Thank you very much, Steve. That is perfect timing, because I know that in 60 seconds, I think the system cuts everyone off. So I hope you'll all agree with me out there in the audience. 6 really good presentations from 6 highly experienced leaders in the industry. Thank you all for giving us the time today. Thank you all for listening. And Sergey, if you're there, we'll hand back to you for 20 seconds.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you very much, François. Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you very much, Caryn. Thank you very much, Stefan. Thank you very much, Nicola. Thank you, my great friends. Let's cooperate. Let's move forward. The world is so fragile. Let us do our best to preserve this wonderful world with the sky of blue and the grass of green, as in the long song it was mentioned. Let us work together, and I consider that together we shall be able to make this fragile world a little bit more sustainable and to preserve it for the coming generations. Thank you very much for your participation in this discussion.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.